The Bloodline may be getting a new member very soon, and it may not be the one that we thought it would be. However, Jacob Fatu, we know, has signed with WWE, and they are waiting and waiting and waiting, apparently, to debut him and decide when the time is right. But could this new signing, which is not Jacob Fatu, change everything in terms of the dynamic of this Bloodline story and who exactly is on which side? That is where things get interesting because the newest signing, as you may have seen by now, seems to be Hikuleo. And he, of course, comes from New Japan. The reports are that he wrapped up with New Japan this past weekend at Dominion. And now the possibility or likelihood is that he is heading to WWE to join this Bloodline storyline. You guys know I've made the jokes. I'm like, if you think this Bloodline story is ending anytime soon, they're never going to run out of members because there are connections everywhere. You saw the Rock's family tree at the WrestleMania 40 kickoff event in Las Vegas many months ago. You saw how big that thing was. And so there are plenty of members still out there that can join this thing, and it looks like Hikuleo is the next one to join. Now, if you don't know a lot of background about Hikuleo, 6'8", 265 pounds, 33 years old, so a little bit younger than some of the more recent additions. But if you just kind of look at this and what he can be in this Bloodline story, he's not going to come in and be someone who has classic wrestling matches with Roman Reigns and anyone else, Kevin Owens, Randy Orton, anyone else that opposes this new Bloodline, which right now is being led by Solo Sikoa, which my guess would still be that the mystery tribal chief that these guys are, kind of following directions from is The Rock. That will probably be the ultimate reveal that we get many months down the road. But how does Hikuleo factor into this? Well, he does have the tie in the bloodline. He's the adopted son of Haku, so of course that ties him to Tama, Tonga, and Tonga Loa, and a former two-time strong open-weight tag champ, and was obviously in the Gorillas of Destiny faction there with those guys. And so it would just make sense that if Hikuleo is about to join, he is probably going to join the side of Solo, Tama Tonga, and Tonga Loa. That just seems to be something that would make easy sense to kind of seamlessly fit him into the mix. And he gives you a different presence, right? Because look at the guy. As I said, he is 6'8". He is going to very much stand out in this group, even if it is not with the wrestling. And you can go look on Cage Match, you can look on Twitter, you can see everyone talking about Hikuleo's wrestling skills and all of that, and that's fine. But in WWE, as we know, it is all about the presentation. How do you get someone over? And I think that's where having a 6'8" guy to work with, it's like, just ask the question, what can WWE do with someone that is, that big? They can kind of put him into the story and use that physical presence as something that is kind of what gets him over versus, again, having to go out and wrestle 15-minute matches. That's just not going to happen, I don't think, in kind of singles competition. So it is an intriguing addition because when you look at it now, and I just sort of teased it, this could change kind of the dynamic. Because remember, we've had these discussions before, and we've gone back and forth. Everyone's had different opinions and lots of good discussion about how we think this thing's going to play out. You guys know where I stand if you've watched videos before. The original Bloodline is coming back, and we know at least part of that is going to include Roman Reigns and the Usos. That's going to happen. We've got to get the band back together on that side, and when that happens, we don't know. This is kind of a slow burn. It could take a little while, because remember, too, I think the ultimate big thing we're waiting for is the return of The Rock and how that factors into a potential match with Roman Reigns and all of that. But that could be many months, as I said, down the road. But when you look at the factors that now play into this and who could be on which side, I think it's, again, a slam dunk that you would bring in Hikuleo if that is the choice here. You're going to put him on the side of Solo, Tama Tonga, and Tonga Loa. And why? Because they are pushing Solo now as sort of the main featured act here, right? Outside of Paul Heyman. I said I think Paul Heyman's kind of the featured player here because they have to sort of play off of all the emotions and the roller coaster that Paul Heyman is on right now, trying to figure out what to do with this new rogue bloodline. But Solo is kind of front and center. And so you have the backup now with the Gorillas of Destiny. If you bring in Hikuleo, you get kind of that towering presence that joins the mix now for Solo. And he's building his own little squad, right? Perhaps, as I said, at the direction of The Rock. And so Solo is the one that has to continue progressing as a character. I think they've done a pretty good job with Solo. I know there's some people that still say, hey, he doesn't have that presence of a Roman Reigns. Well, of course he doesn't. Like, it's not, he may never get there, but I think they're trying, and I think they're trying to at least put in a position where he's having a chance to succeed in this role, even if, again, it's not Roman Reigns leading the bloodline. And as we talked about previously, how this could change things. Jacob Fatu, you guys know I mentioned the report. That's been a little while now, maybe a month ago, something like that. There was a rumor/report out there that WWE was concerned that bringing in Jacob Fatu and perhaps having him join this rogue edition of the Bloodline could be problematic because they thought that Jacob Fatu could sort of overshadow Solo, given the fact that, as we've talked about before, Jacob Fatu, more experienced. You just watch the guy. He does kind of have that it factor, that presence. And again, I think it's just being a more established, wrestler, more of a veteran. Solo is still newer, and it's wild to think that this is kind of the ascent that Solo has had. Not long ago, he was in NXT, and then he got thrust into this Bloodline role a couple years ago, and now he's the main guy on television each and every week. But initially, we wondered, would this be just as easy as having Solo, Jacob Fatu? At the time, we were trying to figure out all the different pieces of the puzzle. Who else would kind of be on that side? We saw Tonga join the mix, and then, of course, we got sort of the surprise addition of Tonga Loa. And now, if Hikuleo joins, well, that gives you 4 on that side. And then, if you want to do the math, as I said, Roman Reigns and the Usos on the other side, well, that's 3 against 4. Where did Jacob Fatu factor into the mix? Do we now have a situation where once they do bring Jacob Fatu in, maybe do they pivot and put him on the side of Roman Reigns and the Usos? And I know there have been people from the start saying that was probably the most likely scenario here. And I just didn't know because I didn't know we were going to get the influx of New Japan talent here in the Guerrillas of Destiny and Hikuleo, perhaps. And so that would make it even, right? That would make it 4-on-4 if you bring The Rock into the mix. Although I don't think The Rock, as I've said before, is wrestling in a War Games match or anything like that. But we're looking ahead here. We're looking at possibilities. Adding Hikuleo gives you 4 on that side, assuming I would just have to think he's joining that side. I don't think he's joining the original Bloodline group. But there's also still some interesting possibilities where I think you can still put Jacob Fatu and Hikuleo both on the side of the Rogue Bloodline. And in fact, I think that gives you a little bit more star power because I do think Jacob Fatu, based on WWE, feeling of this, based on that report, if they are concerned that Jacob Fatu is going to overshadow Solo, that tells you that they think Jacob Fatu is going to immediately make a huge impact in terms of star presence. And so if that's the case, he doesn't really need to be on the side of Roman Reigns and the Usos because you've already got the star presence there. With Roman Reigns, one of the biggest stars out there and has been for years, Jey Uso, who we've talked about, his star power has continued to rise and rise and rise. Jimmy may not be on that same level, but he's been affiliated with this group, and he's still going to get a big pop whenever he comes back too. Perhaps, again, in whatever combination they decide to do and however they decide to reunite the Usos and Reigns, that's going to give him a big pop. So he's going to feel like a bigger star too. But let's say you do go the route of putting Solo Sikoa, Jacob Fatu, Tama Tonga Loa, Hikuleo. So we just keep listing off names here, and it's like, wow, this is where we're at with the Bloodline now. Of course, that's 5 on that side. If you go with Roman Reigns and the Usos, that's 3. Then you got to figure out who are the additional ones. Well, I'm going to lay out in a video in the next couple of days, you guys, of why I think this is now becoming much more clear as to why we could still see it play out this way, where I don't know that you have to put Jacob Fatu on the side of Roman Reigns and the Usos anymore. I think there is a much more logical combination you could put on that side to make this thing even bigger and to give, like I said, a little more star power to this Rogue Bloodline. And I think that's where Jacob Fatu adds that with Solo Sikoa. If you pair him up with Solo, and they're kind of the leaders here pushing this thing, I think that gives you enough. Because again, if you don't have that, I would wonder if you're looking at a match, let's say it's Roman Reigns, Jacob Fatu, and the Usos against Solo, the Guerrillas of Destiny, and Hikuleo. WWE would have to do a just nearly flawless job to make anyone think that there is the possibility that that Rogue Bloodline has a chance in a feud with those 4 guys, because that is a stacked side, right? Not that it's going to be easy either way, but I think if you put Fatu with Solo, with Tama Tonga, with Tonga Loa, with Hikuleo, that does give you 5. That's the numbers advantage, but he gives you that star presence, I think, that you need. And it gives you a little bit something different with everyone. I mean, again, we've talked about it. Hikuleo now, the big guy coming in, right? Like he's going to be the biggest guy of this entire story, height-wise, size-wise, all that. So that gives him something to work with in terms of how they tell the story there, sort of the menacing, whatever they decide to do, right? And so I think that is probably the direction they still head in. I still think there is a good chance that we get all of these new additions on that side. because I think there are a couple of good options that can join Roman Reigns and the Usos on that side. You guys probably know what it is. I'm just trying to tease it for another video. We talked about this potential combination before, but now that I look at the way this is playing out, I think there is a decent chance. If you're going to do a War Games match, you're going to do 5-on-5, I think there's a great opportunity to align some former rivals together to be able to make this thing work. But as we said too, we still don't know even if Hikuleo is coming in. We don't know when he's going to debut. Could it be really soon? Could it be a little while? We've been waiting on Jacob Fatu for months, so they've still not decided to bring him into the mix. But what I do like about this is that it continues to be a little bit unpredictable. You still don't know exactly. We've tried, right? We've tried for months. We've had fun with this, trying to figure out how they're going to pair all these combinations together, and they've threw us a couple curveballs by the addition of bringing in Tama, Tonga, and Tonga Loa. We didn't expect that from the beginning. We thought it was going to be as simple as Jacob Fatu is going to join this thing very soon, and boom, that's going to be kind of easy to work with. But they've kept us kind of guessing along the way, and I think that's the biggest thing that this Bloodline story has going for it right now, is the unpredictability of how they're going to get to where they want to get to. Even if we know or have a very good idea of where they're leading us with the "We Want Roman" chants, with Jey making some of the comments he's made in the promo, and all that stuff, Jimmy being taken out, we know what their motivations are and what they're going to be once they return in kind of that world, right? In the world of the Bloodline. We know what their motivations are going to be, but we don't know exactly how we're going to get there. And that's the fun of this thing. It's trying to figure out how WWE is going to piece all this together. And again, I think that's the biggest thing this storyline has going for it right now. I know there's some criticism, and trust me, every week there's not a huge development when it comes to the Bloodline. It's not like it used to be, when there was, it seemed like something every single week that made you tune in and say, this is must see. It's not been that way with Solo's version. But I think it is, like I said, a bit of a slow burn, and we're going to have to get there. It may take a while, but I think it'll be worth it once we get to that point. And like I just said, the unpredictability aspect, we probably would not have predicted a month ago that Hikuleo could factor into this thing very soon, but it seems like that is going to be a very likely possibility coming very soon for WWE by adding the 6'8" Hikuleo to the new version of the Bloodline. But you guys let me know what you think in the comments. What do you think about this new addition, potentially adding Hikuleo to the mix, and how do you see this dynamic playing out? I feel like we ask this every time we see a new member. Does this change things in terms of who you think is going to be on which side? Where do you stand on Jacob Fatu? As I said, I'm working on a video for you guys in the next couple of days. I'm going to kind of lay it out of how I think this is now going to play out, especially knowing that we think Hikuleo's on the way. I think there's a very good way to sort of play this thing out. I'm going to give you my predictions on that coming up in a video in the next couple of days. So if you want to watch that, be sure to hit the subscribe button, and be sure to check out everything else here on the channel. We've done a lot of videos on the Bloodline. We've done a lot of guessing, and we're still guessing. What's next? Triple H did say after WrestleMania that Roman Reigns was going to have a mind-blowing storyline, or whatever, however he phrased it. He's not wrong so far. There's a lot of stuff being added to the mix here, and we'll see where it goes with the Bloodline. But let me know what you guys think about this possible new addition to the Bloodline.